He was rejected, misunderstood, broken, but he chose to rise. This is not just a story about diving. This is about courage, pain, and becoming a legend. This is the story of Greg Louganis, the man who turned tragedy into immortality. Greg Louganis was born to a teenage mother who gave him up for adoption. Even before he could speak, the world had already said, "You don't belong." Growing up in California, Greg battled asthma, dyslexia, and constant bullying. He was mocked for being different, too quiet, too graceful, too other. But deep down, Greg had something most didn't, a fire no rejection could put out. At age 9, Greg discovered diving. The silence underwater, the freedom in the air, it became his escape. Each dive felt like flying away from pain. He was a natural, a prodigy, but no matter how good he got, the world still tried to box him in. A brown-skinned boy adopted by white parents. A quiet child who danced and flipped instead of fighting back. He didn't fit the mold, so he shattered it. By 16, Greg Louganis had won his first Olympic silver. But behind the smiles were secrets. He was battling depression, struggling with his identity, and hiding something he couldn't say out loud, that he was gay in a world that wouldn't accept it. But Greg kept diving, not for medals, but to survive. Los Angeles, 1984. The world watched as Greg Louganis delivered perfection. A gold medal in the springboard, then another on the platform. Flawless, elegant, powerful. He wasn't just the best diver in the world. He was art in motion. But even as the cheers echoed, he still felt alone, because the world loved the athlete, but didn't know the man. So, 1988, Greg Louganis climbed the board again, 4 years older, and this time carrying a secret. He was HIV positive. During a preliminary dive, he miscalculated and hit his head on the board. Blood in the water. The crowd gasped. The world froze. But Greg, he got back up. With a stitched-up scalp, he stepped back on the board and performed the dive of a lifetime. He didn't just win gold. He rewrote history. He redefined bravery. For years, Greg told no one about his HIV. He feared judgment. He feared being erased. But in 1995, he finally said the words out loud to the world. And what happened? He was no longer just a diver. He became a symbol of truth, of strength, of the fight against shame. Greg Louganis could have disappeared after the Olympics, but instead he chose to show up at schools, at pride parades, at hospitals. He mentored young athletes. He stood with those living with HIV. He spoke openly, cried publicly, and healed quietly. Greg didn't need another medal. He was building something bigger, a legacy. Today, Greg Louganis is remembered not just as the greatest diver in history, but as the man who turned pain into beauty. The boy who was bullied became a global icon. The teen who was silenced became a voice for millions. And the man the world tried to break stood taller than ever, on the edge of that diving board, facing the sky, fearless. He didn't just dive into water. He dove into fear, into stigma, into the unknown, and he came out of it, gold around his neck, scars on his skin, and truth in his heart. Greg Louganis didn't just win. He endured. He inspired. He became immortal. Champions aren't made by victories. They're made by what they survive. And Greg Louganis, he survived everything. This is not just a story of sport. This is a story of what it means to be human. Thanks for watching.